Nothing like nothing like some fake laughter to get a show started. Hey everybody, my name is Paul Abernathy. Welcome to the podcast, Let's Ask Paul, the podcast where I answer all of your pressing electrical code related questions to which you can agree or disagree, or you can accept them and feel enlightened. But thanks for joining me. Remember, if you have any questions and you want to get a part of the program and you want to submit those questions, just go on over to paulabernathy.com. It's a free portal. You can put in your name, email address, put in your question, click that submit button. You can even listen to all of the Let's Ask Paul series podcasts over on that website as well. Works on any browser, any phone, whatever. And if you haven't downloaded our app yet, what are you waiting on? Go on over to electricalcodeacademy.com, .net, or .org. It doesn't matter. Electrical Code Academy. Or you could go to www.necchat.com as well. That's necchat.com. And you can download the app on your phone. You can listen to all of our podcasts directly from the app as well. So that's a cool thing. Really works because it syncs up good with your Bluetooth devices and whatnot, playing in the car or whatever you're using. So welcome to the show. We got a pretty good show today. I'm going to talk about two things that I get asked quite often. And in fact, they came up recently. And no, we're not going to do any submission today. I have a bunch of them, but today I'm going to talk about two things that come up in the National Electrical Code. And we're looking at it from the perspective of the 2023 edition of the NEC, only because it added additional clarity to it. So it's still the same intent, but we're going to look at two things. The first of which is going to be talking about when we have lighting outlets in interior stairways. We're going to talk about the switching rules in 210.70A2. We're going to look at that a little bit because there's been people asking about whether you can use dimmers or not. Oh, that's not a practice I would do, but the code does address that, and it addresses it a little better now in the 2023. It's still the same intent, but the language addresses it and it actually adds the word dimmer in there now. So we'll be looking at that. And then the other thing that we'll be looking at tonight is talking about whether or not when the redundancy isn't required in, let's say, a healthcare facility, when we're talking about a patient care space, and when is the redundancy required and when it's not, and things like that. So we'll be looking at that as well. So those are two topics that we want to address in today's episode. So hopefully you're ready for that. Then we can get started into that. But of course, before we get started again, we have to make sure that we give homage to the sponsor of the show, which is Electrical Code Academy Incorporated. If you want to learn the National Electrical Code, there's no better program out there to do it. Just ask our students. Ask people on the Facebook page that have been through the program. Make sure they've been through it and they understand it. Then you will see that it just, it tests you on so many levels to increase your knowledge and make you more rounded when it comes to the National Electrical Code. And that's what it's designed to do. So what we do is we take a program that generally wasn't designed for exam prep, and then we massage it, we coddle it, we add things to it, we add Wednesday nights, we add the competency reviews to it, we add exam style questions, and people can come to Wednesday nights and we break questions down. For example, we have a session tonight. I'm going to be doing pull box requirements. We're going to be talking about angles, straight pulls, U-pulls. We're going to be talking all that because, again, it's one of those things that you never know what's going to be on an exam. So I don't teach people. We don't go out and try to find exactly what's on an exam. That's just not how I work. My goal is to teach you the National Electrical Code, all elements of it. And so that's what the focus is, so that if you get an exam that asks you any specific portion of a question, that you can dissect it and break it down, calculate it, and get the answer. That's what we do in our Fast Tracks program. Okay, so if you're interested in something like that, you want to get in a structured plan, that's as much different than just flipping through the code book and praying that you stumble on what you need to know. We have a structured plan that walks you through it. It just makes your study time more productive, and it keeps you focused. and you don't go to these weekend classes or these things that charge you $1,500 to $2,000, and they don't care whether you pass or not, right? So if you're interested in the Fast Tracks program, check it out. It's electricalcodeacademy.net.com or .org. Any one of them will get you there. Of course, you could go to probably any search engine and type Fast Tracks Electrical Exam Prep, and you'll see us. And we'd love to have you in the program. Love to see you in Wednesday night sessions. And they're optional. You don't have to come to every one. But you also get access to the Sparky Hub, a private forum where you can ask questions and all as well with all the students that are in the program that are interested in chiming in. There's some shy ones in there, but if you're interested in chiming in, that's a great place to be, right? Okay, so that's the end of all the promos. If you've stuck with me that long, it's great. YouTube algorithms usually say that people drop off after 4 to 5 minutes anyway. So if you're still with me, all right, we're going to get into today's topic. All right, so the first thing we want to look at is, if you have your code book, is I want you to go to 210.70, and we're going to be looking at A23. Okay, so it's 210.70 A23. And of course, if you're cruising on down the road, you're just listening to this podcast, you're on the job site, don't worry about it. I'm going to read it to you and give you some insight on it. So relax if you don't have your code book handy. That's what these podcasts are all about. Make it a little more relaxed. But what we're talking about is, in dwelling units, we're talking about the lighting outlet requirements, okay? And A is dwelling units. That deals with habitable rooms, kitchens, laundry areas, and bathrooms. So laundry area was new to the 2023, which is requiring your lighting outlets. But the additional locations has to do with additional lighting outlets shall be installed in accordance with the following. And that's what we're talking about today, 210.70 A2. And today's topic is going to be about the interior stairway within the dwelling. So we're talking about the lighting outlets that are going to be installed in an interior stairwell so you don't break your neck and fall down steps. And we're going to be talking about the control devices, the switching aspect of it, because people ask, can you use dimmers in those locations? And you might be surprised at what the code says. Now, there was a slight change from the 2020 to the 2023 when it came to verbiage, although it's still the same intent. So the intent didn't change. So if you're in the 2017, the 2020, or even the 2023, all we really achieved in the 2023 was a little more clarity. That's all. The intent didn't change. So you can relax there. It's not a big deal for that. All right, so let's talk about the lighting outlets that are in an interior stairway. So it says in 210.70 A2 item 3, says where lighting outlets are installed for an interior stairway with 6 or more risers between floor levels. Okay, so it's got to have 6 or more risers between floor levels. It says there shall be a listed wall-mounted control device at each floor level and at each landing level that includes a stairway entry to control the lighting outlets. Okay, so if I've got two-story dwelling, let's say, and I go up 6 steps and I'm at a landing, and there's no other way into this landing except for to go up the steps, then you have no other stairway entry into that landing, so I don't need any control at the landing. Makes sense? That's not new. That's been that way. And then, of course, you turn and you go continue up the steps, and then you'll have your landing at the second floor, okay? Or you're at the second floor. I don't know if I said landing, but you're at the second floor. So you're going to have switching at both the top and the bottom of the stairway, right? And it's going to control the lighting outlets that are in that stairway. Makes sense? So what this is saying is, okay, where lighting outlets are installed for an interior stairway with 6 or more risers between floor levels, there shall be a listed wall-mounted control device at each floor level and at each landing level that includes a stairway entry to control the lighting outlets. So let's look at it differently. If I had a I don't say 3-story building, it really wouldn't be a landing, I guess. But if I had stairways going up 3 stories, and you have at the bottom of the steps, and you have at the top of the steps, and then you kind of the second floor is a middle landing area. But if you have the ability to leave the stairway or enter the stairway from that landing level, then that would be required to also have lighting controls at that level. You with me? So if it's one of those stairways that only have one way in and one way out, it's in from the bottom and out the top, then again, switching at the top and the bottom. That's it. Makes sense? We're not trying to make this brain surgery. So, but the lighting outlets that are installed there, okay, have to be controlled by a listed wall-mounted control device. Now, we used to just simply say switches, but we've changed that because a listed wall-mounted control device may not be connected to the building wiring. Okay, it might be one of those wireless types or whatever. So, I mean, there's other options for that type of thing. So, we've embraced that in the code. We're okay with that. But now, the one that we want to look at, because there are exceptions under this to exception number 1, number 2, and an exception to number 3. And the exception is remote, central, or automatic control of lighting shall be permitted in hallways, in stairways, and at outdoor entrances. So we do have some other options other than listed wall-mounted control devices, right? So we could have remote, we could have a central, okay, we could have automatic controls. So again, you could have something that the moment you hit those stairways, it just immediately lights it up at full brightness. That's an option. In fact, that's funny because the house that I'm having built, I did not wire it. I didn't have that option. It's too far along. The wiring had already been done when I decided to get involved in it. And or they've already had selected the electrician. They wouldn't let me do my own wiring, unfortunately, because I'd have done it if they'd have let me. It really wasn't. If you know anything about liabilities and the way some of these companies, these builders work today, they already had contracts written with companies. Now, I inspected it, and trust me, I made them change a lot of things, but I couldn't add anything. Okay, so in the foyer area, you have a switch to the foyer light, but that's it. It's a single pole by the door. It doesn't make sense to me because the hallway is 15 feet long, and then you go into a living room. Why wouldn't you have a 3-way at the other end so you can turn the foyer light off when you go into the living room? But there isn't that option. So for me, I'm probably going to put a motion sensor at the front door so that when I hit that hallway, the light just comes on and then it goes off on its own after a certain length of time. Of course, I could put the listed wall mount control devices and put a master in the one by the door and put a slave at the end of the hallway. But for me, it's just a hallway. I'm just going to put a motion switch in there. That's just all I'm going to do. But anyway, the point was that is permissible to do that. And that would be an example where we could do that in the stairway if you meet the exceptions to do that. Okay. Now, the question comes up, and this is in item number 4. It says, and this is the 2023 code. Somebody asked on one of the forums, and I think over in the Sparky Hub, one of our students said, can you use dimmers? And if I use a dimmer, what are the rules? Do I have to have dimmers at the other floors? Can I have one dimmer and then regular switches at the other floors? Or how does that work with the dimmer? Well, first of all, I probably would never put a dimmer on an interior stairwell anyway. I don't see the need to dim it down. But the code's going to get you a little bit covered here because here's what it says. So for those that are following along, we're in the 2023 edition, but again, other than the word dimmer being added, most of it's pretty similar, kind of similar to what it was, or at least the same intent as it was in the 2020. But again, it is all highlighted in the 2023. So structurally, there's obviously some changes. And if I look at the significant changes, it looks like Yeah, it doesn't want to give me all of the information. So let's look at it this way. Item number 4 says dimmer control of lighting outlets installed in accordance with 210.70A23, which we just looked at, shall not be permitted. So it's telling me that it's not permitted to use dimming controls of lighting outlets that are in those stairway. Then it says unless. So classic code here. Unless the listed control devices can provide dimming control to maximum brightness at each control location for the interior stairway illumination. So if I were to put a dimmer on the first floor and I put regular switches on the second floor, if the setting of the dimmer at the first floor reduced the brightness to 50%, because that's what dimmers do, and I'm at the top location and I flip the switch to turn on the light in the stairway, if it only comes on at the 50% that it was set by the dimmer, or potentially could be set by the dimmer, then that's not compliant. So I can use the dimmer in wherever location I want, provided it has the ability to, wherever the switching location is I'm at in that stairway, as long as when I turn it on, it can go to maximum brightness. If that's the case, then I'm okay. So that's your threshold there. Can you use dimmers? It starts out saying no, but then it says, well, you can if those devices that can provide dimming control to a maximum brightness at each control location for the interior stairwell illumination, then you're okay. You're okay. So if I set the dimmer on the first floor and I don't use one on the second floor, if it's possible, and I don't know because I haven't tested these, I haven't done it. If I turn the switch on three-way at the top, will it go to full brightness? Well, if it does, then we're okay. There's no problem with the dimmer being at the bottom, right? If it has the ability to go to full brightness, then I'm okay. That's the spirit of what it's saying here. Now, if you put dimmers in all the locations and you want to pay that money to do that, and as long as it can, you can push it and it'll go to full brightness, then you're okay. But the question really was whether or not I can use one dimmer, and you could if the other locations cause it to go to maximum brightness when you turn them on, right? That's the key, if that works. Okay. Straightforward with that one, but hopefully that answers questions for anybody that wants to know whether or not you could use dimmers in an interior stairway. I don't know why you would. I would not want to do that. Just saying. I'm just saying. All right, so the next one that we want to talk about tonight is when it comes to dealing with healthcare facilities. And more specifically, we're talking about whether or not the redundancy that is afforded by 517.13a and b is required. So one of the questions that I guess recently got submitted said, Paul, if I have a luminaire and it's 8 feet above the patient bed location, let's say, okay, and it's obviously a healthcare facility, then it's in a patient care space, but it is up 8 feet. Am I required to have the redundancy? Can I use regular MC? I think that's how it was asked. Can I use regular MC, or do I have to use that special smart ground type of MC? Or MCAP or something from Southwire and Encore's it's smart ground. And the answer to that is well, we need to know a little bit more about the space. So 517.13 is titled Equipment Grounding Conductor for Receptacles and Fixed Electrical Equipment in Patient Care Spaces. Okay, so a luminaire is fixed electrical equipment, and if it's in that patient care space, then we have to kind of analyze a little bit whether or not we're required to have this quote-unquote redundancy. Now, one of the things that did change for the 2023, I started to say 2017, Jesus. The 2023 edition was the exception, used to be exception number 2, and it was after 517.13b. And that didn't really make sense because that was basically an exception that was germane to all of 517.13. So one of the good changes for the 2023, and you know what, sometimes even just subtle changes are still great changes, is that they moved that exception up to after the charging statement. So it's before you even get to A and B, right? So in the 2023 code, it says, I'm going to read it to you. It says, wiring serving patient care spaces shall comply with the requirements of 517.13a and B. Okay, it's not A or B, A and B. All right. Now, here's the exception. So let's go on and read the exception because that pretty much is worded to explain this here. And then I'll paint you the picture. Exception, it says, luminaires more than 7.5 feet above the floor. And, okay, so here's an important example of and. There's no or here, it's and. And the switch is located outside the patient care vicinity, not outside of the patient care space, but outside of the patient care vicinity, shall be permitted to be connected to an equipment grounding return path complying with the requirements of 517.13a or B. And of course, A is where the wiring method itself would qualify as an equipment ground. And of course, B is talking about the need for an insulated equipment grounding conductor run with the branch circuit. Okay, so you could use either or. So when it comes to MC cable, for example, if I was running MC to this patient care space, and let's say it's a treatment room in a healthcare facility, like a hospital, if the lighting is above 7.5 feet and the switching for that lighting is not in the patient care vicinity. Now, what's the patient care vicinity? Now, of course, in the 2023, you got to go all the way back to Article 100 now. It used to be in .2 of 517. Now you got to go all the way back to 100 to read what that is about the patient care vicinity. But basically, the patient care vicinity consists of an area that is 6 feet horizontally in all directions from, let's say, the bed location or the treatment location, and that also extends up vertically 7.5 feet above the floor. So you've got this little cocoon of space around the treatment location. In this case, we'll just say it's the bed inside of one of these patient care spaces inside of one of the healthcare facility patient rooms, okay? So if your switch is outside of that 6 feet, it still can be within the patient care space. It just can't be within that vicinity, okay, within 6 feet of the treatment area. Now, I remind you that in some cases, a treadmill could qualify as a treatment area. So your 6 foot would go out from there, right? That type of thing. But we're just talking just like a treatment bed or whatnot. And so if your switch is outside of that 6 feet and your luminaire is above 7.5 feet, then you're okay. Guess what? You can use regular old MC cable. It's got an equipment ground inside of it. You're good to go. Now, if it's outside of that 6 feet, but let's say the luminaire is not higher than 7.5 feet. So both of these rules have to be met for this exception to work. If the luminaire is less than 7.5 feet, then guess what? Doesn't matter where that switch is, you're going to have redundancy, okay? Especially on the branch circuit that's supplying the luminaire in that patient care space. You with me? Right? So and it's very common in hospitals today to not have any switching in the room and it actually be controlled by a panel somewhere else or by an automation system or some kind of control system, timing system. Then in that case, as long as the luminaires were over 7.5 feet, there's obviously no switch to be in play because it's going to obviously be outside of the patient care vicinity, wherever it may be located. Then I can get away with just running regular MC if I want above the suspended ceiling or above the ceiling or wherever I'm running it. I'm fine. I'm not going to have a problem. But you have to meet both because that's why the and is in there. Okay. Now, if I had my luminaire was above 7.5 feet, say it's recessed, it's in the ceiling, 8-foot ceiling, so it's above 7.5. But by chance, my switching component was on the wall within 6 feet zone of that patient bed, then I have a problem. Then I'm going to have to use what? I'm going to have to meet both of the rules here in 517.13a and b because I didn't meet both of the allowances here in order to be able to use the exception. I can't pick and choose the exception. It either all complies or it doesn't, and then you need to have that redundancy. Make sense? Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of the best way to think about this when you're approaching it. Now, usually one is going to take care of the other. Usually the switch is going to be well away from the patient care vicinity. And typically the luminaires are going to be up into the ceiling. Now, the reason we say typically because you could have examination luminaires that extend down lower than 7.5 feet. That is most certainly going to be fixed, even though it might have an arm on it. It's still fixed electrical equipment. And then, of course, at that case, you're going to have the redundancy and follow the rules in 517.13a, which means the wiring method itself has to qualify as an effective ground fault current path, right? And then you've also got to meet B, which is the redundancy, by having an insulated equipment grounding conductor installed in the wiring method as well. So you'd have to meet both of those. Okay, make sense? Yep. So that's kind of explains that. Be honest with you, I don't know that you're ever going to run into a situation where you're going to have, any luminaire that's fixed inside of this patient care space as defined by the NEC. And again, don't confuse vicinity. We're only using the vicinity to apply this exception right here. The patient care space is what it is. So we're just trying to apply when it comes to how you would, and this exception, by the way, only applies to luminaires. Okay. That's an important thing to think about as well. That only applies to that. Okay. Now, the code has some really, Link has some really good enhanced content on this, and I'll read it because it's really good information. So it happens to say that these requirements apply to the branch circuit in spaces used for patient care and are not limited to patient rooms. Exam rooms, therapy rooms, recreational rooms, solaria, whatever that is, and certain patient corridors are also covered by these requirements. Because again, in some hospitals, they actually will have trauma done in corridors, and it turns into, believe it or not, an area that be classified by that hospital as a trauma area. Then that would also be patient care space. Okay, so there's so many things you need to quantify this from the actual whoever's designing the healthcare facility, right? It also goes on to say, the branch circuit wiring method used in these areas is one component of a two-part ground fault current return path arrangement that is unique to patient care spaces. It says the metal raceway, metal cable armor, like Smart Ground from Encore or MCAP Healthcare, let's say from Southwire or something like that, or metal sheath cable must qualify as an EGC in accordance with 250.118. And y'all remember, 250.118 is the list of things that can qualify as an equipment grounding conductor. So if you want to see a list of what qualifies, then you would go to 250.118. And it says independent of the second component of the equipment grounding method covered in 517.13b. So this is saying you've got to have the armor or the raceway qualify under 250.118, but then you also have to have the second component, and that is you have to have an insulated equipment grounding conductor run inside the wiring method as well. Okay? Okay. So anyway, so that's just, and this goes a little more, but that's just gives you the gist of the rules. So hopefully that explained it a little bit better. Again, if it didn't, do me a favor, go on over to the Sparky Hub. We have a free public area where you can post questions and other people will chime in. Now, you don't get access to the private area, so don't even try to apply unless you're a fast track student. Trust me, we monitor that, so we won't give you an approval. But if you want to post your questions, a lot of the students go in and out of both forums. So we have the public available Sparky Hub that's over at www.thesparkyhub.com. We'd love to have you over there. There's 2,400 members. Post your questions and start a conversation. We'd love to have you. It's a great forum that allows you to just feel free to post questions, and don't worry, you won't get belittled. We won't let that happen. And if it happens, I'll make sure it stops pretty quickly. So anyway, hopefully you check it out. thesparkyhub.com. We'd love to have you there. Folks, I appreciate you listening to the show. Hopefully you got something out of the day's episode. Again, if you've got questions, do me a favor. Go to paulabernathy.com. Submit your question. I'd love to answer it for you live. Or live. Sometimes I'll do this in coffee hours and I'll answer questions, but I'd also love to answer it on podcasts or even in an email if you prefer to have it via email. I can do that. So till next time, folks, stay safe, God bless, and hopefully you learned something. And everybody out there, have a wonderful and blessed Thanksgiving. Till next time, stay safe.